Okay. And this is Minor Prophets, and we are in the book of Hosea. And so Hosea is one of the longest of the minor prophets. I think probably the longest as far as pages. Okay, so it's the longest of the minor prophets, and it's got more pages. It's got as many more chapters, I think, than Daniel, but it's shorter book because the chapters are shorter. Hosea lesson 3. Hosea is providing for Gomer. Remember, he takes her back, but she's a wife to no man. That would include him, see. So he's going to take care of her, but she's not going to be his wife anymore. But she's gone off into harlotry, okay? So Hosea is providing for Gomer was to typify God's providing for Israel. And so I think it's probably a type. And it's not a type in our time, but a type to the Jews that would come later at that time. That are going to come later after Israel goes off to captivity when they come back. And so God is treating her like Hosea is treating Gomer. And so he's going to take care of Israel, and then he's going to get him a new wife in Acts chapter 2. Any questions? Gomer redeems her as Gomer is redeemed by Hosea, and Gomer was taken back under certain conditions. So she's redeemed. Israel will also be taken back conditionally under certain conditions in Hosea 3:4. Second David is to be king. Okay, the second David is obviously Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ. And so this is a prophecy of Jesus and his church. And so we see how this ties in now. Hosea's providing for Gomer was to typify God's providing for Israel. Now we're going to look at Gomer's redemption. She's purchased. And Jehovah or Yahweh, the Lord, the King James, I think, says the Lord. When the King James has all caps Lord, it's the same as the word Jehovah or Yahweh. Probably Yahweh is probably the correct pronunciation. I think they've done a study on it. And I think there's probably some pretty good evidence that Yahweh is the correct pronunciation. Now remember, Hebrew doesn't write any of the vowels. It only writes the consonants. And so if you write the consonants on my name, M-A-R-I-O-N, you get M-R-N. And that would be your 3 consonants. Then you put whatever vowels you want to with it. It could be Marion, my name, or it could be maroon, a color, M-A-R-O-O-N, or it could be moron, okay? And some people think that better fits me. But so you could just put different vowels with it and come up with different names. And so this becomes a problem in translating the Hebrew text because it only writes the consonants. You have to put the vowels with it. Figure out what the word was, put the vowels with it. The Lord said unto me, go again, love one that loved her friend, and an adulteress, even as Jehovah loveth the children of Israel. So they turned unto other gods and loved cakes of raisins. Now, cakes of raisins was a delicacy, the sweetness of the raisins and the cakes that they would eat, but they were giving these cakes to false gods. And so this is something they gave to their false gods, idol. I just call them false gods or idol gods. In English, we write it with a little G-O-D, whereas the true God, we capitalize it with a capital G-O-D. And so that's how we make a distinction in English. And it's kind of an artificial distinction, but I think it's a good distinction to make a distinction between the true God and any false God, okay? So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver and a homer of barley and half homer of barley. Now, a homer is a measure, a dry measure of something, and we would put it in the metrics, would probably have it in liters, and we would have it in bushels or quarts here in the United States, or gallons. And those could be liquid or dry measures either. We usually use, for dry measure, we use bushels and pecks.
Just as a side note, in the NET translation, I'm sorry, yeah, the NET translation, they measure it out as 7 bushels of barley.
Bushels?
7 bushels.
It's a dry measure. And a bushel of wheat normally weighs about 60 pounds. Okay, so it's 7 homer of barley. Barley is probably a little lighter than wheat, so it'd probably weigh about 55 pounds a bushel would, as far as our weight. And so that would be the weight we have. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds, I believe, somewhere thereabouts. Okay. Thank you for adding that, Richard. Appreciate it. All right. So he bought her for 15 pieces of silver. Well, 30 pieces of silver was the price of a regular slave. Okay. So he had to take the half the price of a slave and threw in some extra. That's what he had to buy her. So he bought her like you'd pay for a broken down slave. Does that make sense? That would be what you'd pay for a broken down slave. Hosea bought her for the price of a wounded slave. In Exodus 21:32, it's claimed that the 1.5 homers of barley brought 15 shekels of silver. This seems a bit much to me, but it might be. Some commentators claim that would be the price of a full slave. If an ox go a manservant or maidservant, then shall be given unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and an ox shall be stoned. So you stone an ox that purposely gores people. You don't let them live. So right here now, that 15 shekels of silver is a wounded slave, see, wounded servant. Actually, the word slaves is not a correct word. It's to be a servant, a wounded servant. So that's half the price he would pay normally for a slave or a servant. Okay, 30. Jesus was 30 pieces of silver, see, and so he was sold for the common price of a slave. This is carried, of course. Seems more likely that he bought her for a little bit more than half the price of a wounded slave or servant. Some think it was 30 pieces because that is what Judas was paid for Jesus. Some take that to be that value, and that the barley was that 15 more shekels. So there's 2 different interpretations on this, and I'm going to go with the wounded servant, okay, and a little more than a value of a wounded servant. The woman that is purchased here must be Gomer. She's not mentioned, however. Otherwise, this whole parallel breaks down. So it's obviously you're to buy her for the price of a wounded servant. See, she's been wounded by her harlotry, and she's probably gotten sold. Now the men don't want her anymore, and for her prostitution. Okay, so she's not wanted anymore. So Hosea takes her back, takes care of her, but he still loves her. Gomer was taken back upon certain conditions, however. So he gave her some conditions. I said unto her, and I believe he's speaking to Gomer, Hosea is, thou shalt abide with me many days, thou shalt not play the harlot, thou shalt not be any man's wife. So will I also be toward thee, I will not be your husband. And so I'm just going to take care of you. So here she is. She can't sell her body anymore because she's probably gotten old and not desirable to men anymore, very, very much so. And so now he takes care of her. So she has her sustenance, food and sustenance, and provided for her because he loves her. And I think you can see the great love Hosea has. And this love he has for Gomer is the same type of love God has for Israel. And it's almost a touching situation when we see what he does in providing for her, and she's spitting in his face, yet he still loves her. And we use that figure of speech here, spit in my face. And that spitting in the face was a symbol of rejection of people in several societies. Gomer was not to be any man's wife. That would include Hosea's wife, this woman, and I believe to be Gomer. Okay? Dad took care of Gomer, but she was no longer his wife. This is just like God taking care of Judah and Israel, but waiting for them to have a pure heart under the gospel. So, if we go back, I want you to see this. You shall not play the harlot anymore. When Israel came back from captivity, from the time Israel left Egypt, they had trouble with idolatry. Even in the wilderness, they had trouble with idolatry. Remember how they made the golden calf and worshipped it. So they had trouble with idolatry over and over and over again. But finally, when they went into captivity and they came back from captivity, there is no record whatsoever in any of the writings, whether that be of the prophets or the writings of the Maccabees or Josephus or others, that they had a problem with idolatry anymore. They didn't play the harlot anymore. They ceased to play the harlot. But by playing the harlot, I'm playing the harlot with other gods, spiritual adultery. Okay, so here Hosea took care of Gomer, but she was no longer his wife. It's just like God taking care of Judah and Israel after they come back from captivity, but waiting for them to have a pure heart under the gospel. Hosea 3, verses 2 through 5. Israel was to cease to be the wife of God for a period of time, will be blessed by God later. Now let's go to Isaiah and see that very principle. Sing, O barren, and thou didst not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou didst not travail with child. For more the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith Jehovah. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thy habitations. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. For thou shalt tread abroad on the right hand, on the left, and thy seed shall possess the nations. Make the desolate cities to be inhabited. And this is a figure of speech referring to spiritual Israel, not to physical Israel. Fear not, for thou shalt not be ashamed, neither be thou confounded, for thou shalt not be put to shame, for thou shalt forget the shame of thy youth. You're going to forget the shame of your youth, which was idolatry, see? And the reproach of thy widowhood, thou shalt remember no more. You are like a widow. For thy maker is thy husband, Jehovah hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is thy Redeemer. This is talking about the Holy One of Israel. This is talking about the church. The God of the whole earth shall he be called. For Jehovah hath called thee as a wife, forsaken and grieved in spirit. I've forsaken you as a wife, and grieved in spirit, even a wife of youth when she is cast off. So I cast you off, I divorced you. But I took care of you like Hosea took care of Gomer. And I was preparing you and letting you provide me with Messiah, the race of people to whom Messiah would come. For a small moment have I forsaken thee. I forsook you for a while, but I've taken you back now. But with greater mercy will I gather them to gather you. But what I'm going to gather is not the whole of nation of Israel. It is the remnant that are faithful and the remnant that are godly. And this is laid out for us. So we have to study this very carefully. I believe that the gist of the Bible that we've had the class in, and Chris Hill has taught it for us, and from my notes, I believe that it's it shows this principle here and this laid out here, this very thoroughly laid out point here for us in this right here. But let's go further. This is quoted in Galatians 4:27. For it is written, rejoice thou barren, that bearest not, break forth and cry, thou that travailest not, for more of the children of the desolate than have heard that hath the husband. Okay? The desolate would be those that have been deserted, saying those that have the husband. God had forsaken his wife because of her sin, but he would care for her until the church was established. And the church is going to have more members in it than the nation of Israel. Okay? Certainly than the apostate people. This may refer to Judah, Israel, but was to be put away by her husband, Jeremiah 3:1 and 2. They say, if a man put away his wife and she go from him and become another man's, will he return unto her again? Will not that land be greatly polluted? Under the law of Moses, we'll see, and I think we'll see in a moment here, I think my notes will have it in it. If a man divorced his wife and she married another man, he couldn't take her back. He couldn't take her back, but if he divorced her and she didn't marry another man, he could take her back. Okay? So now let's go back to this now and read it again. Jeremiah 31:3-1. They say, if a man put away his wife and she go from him and become another man's wife, will he return unto her again? The answer is no. Will not that land be greatly polluted? It's forbidden by the law of Moses, see. But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers. All right, you played the harlot. So I divorced you, see. Yet return again unto me, said, so you want to return back. You left me and married another husband, another God. You went after many lovers, false gods. And he's talking about spiritual adultery, is what he's talking about here. Verse 2, lift up thine eyes unto the bare heights and see, for hast thou not been lain with? And he's talking about lift up the bare heights. Now, what did they worship? They worship in the high places. And that may be what was going on at the Tower of Babel, the high place to worship. Right? I'm not sure what was going on there in the Tower of Babel. Might be they're trying to get away from a flood again. Okay, thought it was going to happen again. But God had promised that wouldn't happen again. But I think they were worshiping in high places, what they were doing. Right. Now lift up thine eyes unto the bare heights and see, where hast thou not been lain with? So he's using fornication as the spiritual adultery that have you. Where have you not worshipped false gods? Basically, is what he's saying. By the way, as thou sat with him by the road, see, as an Arabian wilderness, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms, with thy wickedness. And so not only did they engage in spiritual adultery, but many times the false religion was had sexual overtones to it. And so this was physical adultery, as well as spiritual adultery in the instances. This passage referring to Deuteronomy 24:1-4, for a man is not allowed to take his divorced wife back after she married another man. Now, before she married another man, he could take her back, but he couldn't take her back after she married another man. Let's see what it says. When a man taketh a wife and marries her, it shall be, if she find no favor in his eyes, though she has found some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. Okay? Now then, read the next verse. If the latter husband hate her and write her a bill of divorcement, give it to her hand and send her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, if he divorced her or die, either one, and took her to be his wife. So if the latter husband takes her, her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for that is an abomination before Jehovah. Thou shalt not cause the land to sin, but Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. You take her back. That's what we see here. You can't take her back. Principle of a fortiori, principle of hermeneutics. What is true of the lesser is true of the greater. prevents God from taking Israel and Judah back after he divorced them and they married another God. What do we mean there? If a man can't take his wife back after she's taken another husband, then God can't take what's true of the lesser is true of the greater. God can't take Israel back after he divorced her and she married a false God, another husband. God took care of them, however, but was not a husband to them. That's what we see in the book of Hosea. He's taken care of them until the Messiah comes. Israel would also be taken back conditionally. Let's go back to Hosea 3:4. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without king and without prince, without sacrifice and without pillar and without ephod or teraphim. And what does that mean? They won't have a king, they won't have a prince. They didn't have a king after they went into Babylonian captivity. The northern 10 tribes went into Assyrian captivity in about 722 BC. And about 120 years later, there were 3 goings away into Babylonian captivity. And finally, they went fully into captivity. Even all the Jews didn't go into captivity. If you go back and study it, the poor people stayed in the land and were there. And Jeremiah stayed with them and was trying to lead them and teach them. And they wouldn't listen to him. And they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't believe him. And an Ishmaelite killed the Babylonian governor, and the people got scared, thought that they would be killed by the Babylonians. But Jeremiah said, no, that's not going to happen. And so they didn't believe Jeremiah, so they forced him to go down with them to Egypt. That's in summary. And what we have there, those poor people were to have gotten the land in the Sabbath years, and God promised them, you can have this land for 70 years and you get all your Sabbaths back. All you poor people didn't have the land. And they were to be blessed. God was going to bless them. But they didn't trust God's prophet Jeremiah. It's a sad story. It is a sad story when we read it. See it. They had the blessing right there in front of them and they just didn't have enough faith to reach out and take it. And live in it and be blessed by God, these poor people. But that's another story, another time. So let's go back now. Let's read this again. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without king. They didn't have a king. They didn't have a king after they went to Babylonian captivity. No king at all until Jesus came and reigned. And he became the king of spiritual Israel, not physical Israel. And my kingdom is not of this world, he told Herod in John 18. And without prince and without sacrifice and without pillar and without ephod or teraphim. All right? They're not going to have these false gods anymore. All right? And the sacrificing ceased. It finally ceased. We see that prophesied in Daniel chapter 9. Israel was to be taken back after God had provided for her from the captivity until the establishment of the church, the new bride of Christ. God took a new bride. The faithful remnant among Israel become part of the church. And then the Gentiles who became obedient to the gospel, they became part of that church, part of that kingdom, part of that bride, the wife of the Lord. It's a beautiful figure when we see it here. We see the tender love of Hosea for Gomer, and that very love that God has for Israel, caring for her all those years. She's not a wife anymore, but I'm caring for her, taking care of her. Wonderful thought. They would neither have a king nor a prince during this time. They would not have an image, a pillar, place to sacrifice to idols, probably that's what that is. Not have an ephod, the robe of the high priest wore. They would not have a teraphim wooden idol to worship. Second, David is to be their king. After this time, afterwards shall the children of Israel return. They'll return back to me. They'll come back to me. They're going to be faithful to me again. And seek Jehovah their God. And David their king. Now, David their king is Jesus. and shall come with fear unto the Lord. They're going to have a godly fear for the Lord now, and in his goodness in the latter days. That's going to happen in the latter days. Right? I think the latter days are the end of the nation of Israel, and the last days, I believe, ended in AD 70. But that's another study for another time. This is an obvious reference to Jesus, the second David, as we see in Jeremiah 23:5. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, saith Jehovah Yahweh. I will raise up David a righteous branch. He shall reign as king and deal wisely. Shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. So his system is the system of righteousness. Righteousness or justice is one of the key doctrines of the book of Romans. And what's he saying here? He's going to bring righteousness. Righteousness. God is righteous in that he provides a fifth purchase price or redemption price for our souls. And the animal blood wouldn't do it because it wasn't valuable enough. God, when he's purchased our souls or redeemed them, an animal just isn't valuable enough because it's not as valuable as a man. And so he had to have the blood of something that's valuable enough. And one man, one righteous man, one perfect man might redeem one person, but he couldn't redeem more than one if he were perfect. But one who is deity, he's infinitely greater than any man, and he is perfect in the perfect sacrifice, Jesus. He can redeem billions and trillions of people if a trillion people live. If before the Lord comes, if they people, his blood sacrifice and atone for all of them. So he's going to execute righteousness, justice, and righteousness. He's going to be righteous in the redemption of souls. A fair price for our souls. Messiah is called David, and we see this in Jeremiah 30, verse 8, Ezekiel 34:23, and Ezekiel 37:24-28. Come to pass in that day, says Jehovah of hosts, that I will break the yoke from off thy neck, will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more make him their bondman. But they shall serve Jehovah their God, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Jesus is the seed of David. He's the descendant of David after the flesh. So he is the son of David, but he's also the Lord of David. And of course, that was a dilemma he gave to the Pharisees. Last dilemma, they couldn't answer it. How can he be the son of David and the Lord of David? He's the son of David because he's born of the flesh, descendant of David. He's the Lord of David because he's the creator of David. He's God in the flesh. I will set up one shepherd over them. Why one shepherd? Well, the shepherd probably represents king because the king was styled like a shepherd. So he's their shepherd. They had a shepherd in Judah, a king, and had a king or a shepherd in Israel, the northern 10 tribes. But I'm going to have one shepherd over them now. They're going to be joined back together. They won't be separate again. They won't be separated anymore. This one shepherd is going to be Messiah. And he shall feed them, even my servant David. He's not literally talking about David. He's talking about one who is a descendant of David. That's Jesus. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. And I, Jehovah, I, Yahweh, I, the Lord, will be their God. My servant David, prince among them, I, the Lord, Jehovah, I, Yahweh, have spoken it. Again, David over and over. That's Jesus. Any questions or comments so far? Ezekiel 37:24, and my servant David shall be king over them. They all shall have one shepherd. Again, remember, they're split into two nations after the death of Solomon. Rehoboam was very foolish, caused the split. They all shall have one shepherd, and they shall all walk in mine ordinances. Now, you say, all of them walk in mine. Yes, in order to get into this kingdom, you got to obey the gospel. You got to walk in his ordinances. Okay? And observe my statutes and do them. The Jews who wouldn't obey the gospel, wouldn't walk in God's orders, they're not going to be part of this kingdom. David is not their king. Jesus is not their king. If we don't serve him, if we don't obey him, he's not our king. We're not obeying him. If he's our king, we're going to do what he says. We're going to obey his word. In Ezekiel 37:25, and they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob, my servant. He's not talking about a physical land. This is all a spiritual kingdom, wherein your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, they and their children, and their children's children, forever. And David, my servant, shall be their prince forever. But David, Jesus, is not a king of a physical realm. Remember what he told Pontius Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world, Matthew 18. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants pick up swords and fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from hence. See, it's not a physical kingdom. Well, it's not a physical land, it's a spiritual land. And that kingdom in Daniel 2 filled the whole earth. The Lord's church exists in nations in every continent except Antarctica. I know of no congregation in the continent of Antarctica. But there are Christians in Australia, Christians in Asia, Christians in Africa, Christians in Europe, Christians in South America, Christians in North America. I think I've named all the continents. I've named Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, North, South America. Okay, I think I've named them all. But I know Christians in Asia. I know Christians I don't know any physically in South America, but I have friends that go there and preach, and they tell me they're Christians there. And I know some Christians in Europe, and I know some Christians in Asia, I know some Christians in Australia, I know some Christians in Africa, and North America, of course. But I don't know anybody, I don't know personally any Christians in South America. Okay. All right. Any questions? So they're all over the world, they're everywhere. And that kingdom filled the whole earth in Daniel 2. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. A covenant of peace. Jesus, Prince of Peace. But he's making peace between God and man. He's not talking about cessation of carnal warfare. And yes, if everybody was a Christian in the whole world, we wouldn't have carnal warfare. But everybody's not going to be a Christian, because the road to heaven is narrow and straight. Few there be that find it. The road that leads to destruction is broad, and many enter therein thereby. So we're not going to have everybody in the world as Christians. Oh, I wish it were so. And it grieves me that people don't obey the gospel, but they're not, because their heart's not right. Everybody's heart's not right. There's some evil and wicked people that don't want to change their way. So let's go back and read it again. Now I'll make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. And so right here, the sanctuary, the temple of the Lord is the church. Let's put it in there. My tabernacle also shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. I want you to study this passage. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. That expression is said over and over and over again in the Old Testament, and it points to Messiah when he comes over and over. It's a very important expression. It's found over and over. And I'm intending to have a class on that and develop that and live long enough. And I hope to have it done in the next 2 or 3 years. In Ezekiel 37:28, I'm sorry. And the nation shall know that I am Jehovah that sanctifies Israel. He's not talking about physical Israel again. Not talking about that nation that's over there in what the land we call Palestine right now. He's talking about spiritual Israel. Okay. when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Okay. Again, our premillennial neighbors get this all mixed up. Jesus, son of David, is Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one. 32 to 34, and I will bring good tidings of the promise made unto the fathers, that God has fulfilled the same unto our children, and that he raised up Jesus, as also is written in the second Psalm. Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. And it's concerned that he raised him up from the dead, now no more to return to corruption. He hath spoken unto this wise, I will give you the holy and sure blessings of David. Oh, you're the seed of David. You're the descendant of David. Questions or comments? Hosea and Gomer are parallel to God and Israel. Gomer was unfaithful to Hosea, and Israel was unfaithful to God. Hosea loved Gomer. God loved Israel. By Israel, I mean both Judah and Israel, all 12 tribes, actually 13 tribes you count the Levites. So Gomer was unfaithful, but Hosea loved her. Israel was unfaithful, and God loved her. Hosea purchased Gomer back as God purchased Israel back. Gomer was taken care of as God cared for Israel in her captivity. And she wasn't offering sacrifices during her captivity, see. Didn't have a priest for the temple. Any questions or comments? All right. Get out.